Before we get into the meat and bones of this video, make sure you follow me on Twitter at MicroMike85. Follow me. I'd like to get around 3,000 followers, so if you are not following, go do that, and you'll get information on Lions right when it happens, about 15-20 minutes afterwards. In today's video, we're going to be doing 5 surprise cut candidates, players who I think could be cut. That would be a shock to us. And we just did the 5 here, and right now we're going to start with my number 1 surprise cut candidate would be Craig Reynolds, and I love Craig Reynolds. I truly do not want him to get cut, but they did go ahead and draft Sion Vaki, who is a safety / running back, and that pushes the running back room a little bit farther out. Now, personally, I'd like to see Zonovan Knight be the odd man out, because I like Craig Reynolds. I like what he does as a third down running back and a number 3 running back. All he does is produce. There's nothing of indication to hear that this guy cannot produce, and there is nothing to indicate that this guy is a disruptor in the locker room. It's a good 1, 2, 3, and Sion Vaki is a powerful back, though, and so it could push Craig Reynolds out of the room, considering maybe they would like to save a little bit of money because he is a veteran. What if they just simply want to go in a different direction, as we've seen multiple times with other running backs who's been on this team? I.e. Williams, who's gone now and went to the New Orleans Saints, so Craig Reynolds could be one of those guys. I don't want it to be the case, but he absolutely could be. Let me know in the comment section. What do you think? Do you think that he is a surprise cut candidate? And I got a question for you. Do you believe that Craig Reynolds could be gone? Y for yes and N for no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope not, but hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. Now, the next list on my next player who I think could be a surprise cut candidate is Levi Onwuzurike, the defensive tackle, whom Brad Holmes drafted in his first draft as a Detroit Lion in the 2nd round. Now, I must say, I really appreciate Levi Onwuzurike, because last year before the season started, we assumed he wasn't even going to make the roster and he could retire due to that fusion that he had on his spine, but he toughed it out, and I tell you what, he actually was on the field. But still, if you look at the depth, specifically after the NFL draft, where we got a player in Makai Wingo, who's going to be a defensive tackle right now. He's /edge / defensive tackle, whatever you want to put it right there. And if you look at the room right now, Lee McNeil, DJ Reader, they're not going anywhere. Broderick Martin, who they drafted last year. So it puts one of these defensive tackles at a loss, and as much as Levi Onwuzurike and what he has done with this football team, considering the injuries, he's still the odd man out, because I just don't see the Lions releasing Broderick Martin at all. And who they just drafted in Makai Wingo, he's going to be on this defensive line because he could play tackle and edge. He's a tweener type of player. So it really sucks, and I appreciate the work that Levi has done, but he has to be on this list as a player that could be a surprise cut candidate just by the amount of reps that he took last year, his injury history, and they keep building this defensive line, and you have to assume he's the odd man out. That's just my belief system here. And when you look at the other players, like a DJ Reader, who we just signed, he's really good at what he does. Lee McNeil, we got to re-sign him. Broderick Martin is a young guy. They continue to get younger, and it's going to push guys like Levi Onwuzurike out. Even though we invested a 2nd-round pick into him, it's going to push him out. And I do believe that literally the Patricia era is nearly over, so at some point you're going to be starting to releasing Brad Holmes picks, his players whom he invested in, and Levi Onwuzurike honestly could be one of those players. He just legitimately could. Next player on my list is a surprise cut candidate. I don't know if it's really a surprise, but he is definitely possible, is Michael Badgley here. Now, you say, well, Michael Badgley is on the team right now, and he's been doing his thing for a while. He has been, and they got an undrafted kicker they brought in. But there's also a guy in Jake Bates who the Detroit Lions are monitoring, and he is absolutely in discussion, I'm going to assume, as soon as the UFL season is over, to become a Detroit Lion. 64, 62. This guy is nailing big, giant kicks at Ford Field, And that's what we're missing. And he's doing it game time. This is the UFO game. It's not preseason. It's a legit game for him. And the Lions want to get better at kicker. Brad Holmes talked about it before the draft. He wants competition with the kicker position. We didn't draft a kicker. We got it undrafted. And then there's Jake Bates, who they've reached out to. So, to me, I'm just kind of go with a situation here that he really kind of is believing that this is going to be the guy for the Detroit Lions. I'm Brad Holmes. I do believe that. That's what he's telling by not drafting a kicker is we're going to be going after Jake Bates. And Jake Bates is going to be part of the solution, the young problem that we've been having at the kicker as of late. You know, we've been good since all the way for many, many years in the kicker position in Detroit, and we haven't found one yet under Brad Holmes' regime. So I got a question for you because of undrafted rookies as well. So I add this to the list. What grade do you give the Lions 2024 draft class, undrafted and drafted? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's go ahead and continue on here with another player who I do think is a surprise cut candidate. And now he's kind of a fan favorite a little bit. Because this player, Kindle Vildor, after some Jerry Jacobs getting benched, Vildor came in and he actually done a much better job. Now, it wasn't great. We don't like Kindle Vildor as a number 2, but we do like Kindle Vildor as a depth piece at the cornerback position. We do. And there's nothing wrong with to like him. Now, he screwed up on the NFC Championship game with the interception off the face mask, but that was a freak play, right? He's such a weird play. And if you look at the cornerback room, folks, yes, the new corners that we drafted is not on here. Why? Because we just drafted him, and there's absolutely no reason they're going to be cut, all right? You invested Terry and Arnold, the first-round pick, and you invested Ennis Registraw in the second-round pick. So besides them, you got Carlton Davis, who they traded for. They're not going to be getting rid of Carlton Davis. They literally just traded for him. Amik Robertson, they picked him up in free agency because they like what he brings to the table. He's not going to get cut. Khalil Dorsey, he has special teams ability. He could be cut, but he does do special teams. Emmanuel Moses, they did him on a one-year easy deal, prove-it deal. We got him last year in free agency. We really liked him. So, and he wasn't healthy this year. What if he comes back and he's going to be healthy? That leaves one player on the list. Kindle Vildor is potentially being cut from the cornerback room. It'd be a surprise cut. We signed him in free agency. He did pretty good for the Detroit Lions while we had him, but it just is what it is. You can't keep everybody. And I would love for Kindle Vildor to be on this roster again as a depth piece. Not as number 1, number 2, number 3, but as a guy who can come in for injury, right? We've seen what he could do last year. We know that he actually can come in if there's an injury, and we're going to have injuries. I actually prefer him over Khalil Dorsey. You know, a lot of people like Khalil Dorsey probably a little bit better, but considering the fact that Dorsey has multiple positions he can play, that gives him an edge at special teams. Last player on my list for a player who could be a surprise cut candidate is Kayode Awosika, the guard. Now, if you look at the Lions depth chart, all honesty right now, he's actually is the backup. Okay, so the first backup. So it would be a surprise cut if he was to be cut for the Detroit Lions. But why do I say him on this list? Because the Detroit Lions did a really good job at the guard position. They've beefed it up. And if you're going to ask where is Manu on here, on the official depth chart, he's actually listed as a tackle. He is behind Taylor Decker as a tackle. So Manu is, he can be guard and he can be tackle. Manu's not going to get cut, right? So we already know that. But yeah, Kevin Zeitler, who we picked up in free agency, he's a starter. Grant Glasgow's a starter. Kayode Awosika is actually the second starter. But they drafted Colby Sorsdale last year. They drafted Christian Mahogany this year. You can't keep everybody. And it's difficult for me to actually look at the Lions cutting Colby Sorsdale, whom they drafted last year, over Awosika, even though I'm going to keep it 100 with you folks. I prefer that. I would prefer Kayode Awosika to stay here over Colby Sorsdale because I think Sorsdale showed that he's not ready. I just don't think he's ready. And at least with Awosika, you know he can come in here and actually do a decent job, right? He's not going to be too horrible because we've seen what he did last year. Before we keep going, follow me on Twitter at MicroMike28. At MicroMike. Follow me on Twitter. That's all you got to do is follow me. Let's continue to keep going on here and talk about players whom the Detroit Lions absolutely could be getting here as a surprise cut candidate. So we're going to go to the list here. And again, you look at this. We got Craig Reynolds, number 1. Levi Onwuzurike is number 2. Michael Badgley, number 3. Kindle Vildor, number 4. And Kayode Awosika, number 5. So my surprise cut candidates. Surprise would be definitely Craig Reynolds. I think it'd be a surprise right there. Levi Onwuzurike, it would be a surprise just because how high he drafted, but it definitely feels like he could be gone. Michael Badgley may not be the biggest surprise because we all fully expect that the Detroit Lions are going to go in there and get a better kicker at the competition. Kindle Vildor would be a surprise, but again, you know, there's just so many corners you can have as this roster gets better at the depth here, and Awosika would be a surprise, and I prefer him to stay on the roster, but again, this is what happens when your roster gets better, and you can't be upset, right? You cannot be upset with some of these players getting cut because this is what happens when your roster gets better. This is what happens when you do a good job at finding talent, whether it be in the draft, free agency, and undrafted. You get better. And the Detroit Lions have gotten better. And that's just the bottom line here, folks. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Hit that red subscribe button. Let us know that you're subscribed to the channel in the comment section. Hit that notification bell. And again, follow me on Twitter. With that said, folks, adios.